Growing up in Oklahoma, I had my fair share of church going and faith questioning. My mom took my sister and I to church every Sunday, while my dad, who's a vocal atheist, would stay home and watch football. And on the car rides home, I would often reenact the church service, and I would take the bottom part of a brown styrofoam cup and pop it out and hold it up like the body of Christ and snap it in half. I didn't understand a lot of what I was doing, but I knew my audience, which was my sister and my mom, and they loved it. My mom eventually aggressively encouraged my sister and I to become acolytes, which meant we wore these giant robes and would go up and down the aisle at the beginning and end of the church service, holding these giant heavy sticks with a giant heavy cross on top, or the more terrifying option, which was holding a giant heavy stick with a lit candle on top, which was always scary for me because I was always scared that I was going to just spill the wax on myself or trip and set the whole church on fire. My parents sent my sister and I to an Episcopal private school because they felt it was the best education we could get in Oklahoma City. And we went there from kindergarten all the way through high school. And we had Bible class, which was weekly and mandatory. And we also had chapel every single morning, which was mandatory every single morning. And chapel was really strict. You had assigned pews that you would sit in with a teacher at sitting at the end of every row. And if you were late to chapel, you would be counted as absent. And if you had many absences, then you would go to detention. And so basically you'd come in, you'd stand, sing a hymn, you'd sit and listen to the speaker, and then the service would conclude with 5 minutes of silence, which was the worst. Because if you made any sound during that 5 minutes, so many people would just turn around and give you like a death stare. It was really weird and fucked up. It was so scary for me. Chapel felt less of like a religious experience and more of like this nightmare challenge that was like testing us on how quiet we could be. And you would lose if you coughed, sneezed, or God forbid, farted. As an 8-year-old, I developed a real anxiety during this time. It got so bad that I was scared to swallow because I thought my swallow would be too loud. I started getting full body sweats, clammy hands. I was having panic attacks. And I think it was in these moments that I was truly actually praying. Please, God, in this moment, do not let me fart. I mean, what's the problem with that? What's wrong with making noise? I mean, if God was real, they wouldn't care if we made a sound. So I started to really dread going to school. And I couldn't not go to chapel, so luckily we had a distraction and some sort of comic relief during chapel, which was our chaplain, Father Marlin. Father Marlin would begin by talking about the Bible, and then he'd go off like half an hour about feelings or colors. He was a very odd man, and when he spoke, he made hand gestures like he was turning doorknobs. And because he's so weird, I have to go on a tangent about him for a second. We had assigned tables in the cafeteria and a teacher at every table, and if you were sitting at Father Marlin's table and he wanted the pitcher of water, he would say, "Please pass the Wawa." It just weirded us out. It was weird. He was odd. And if you were in his Bible class, he had a chalkboard. And he would wipe off the chalkboard with his hand and then lick his hand. Not like before to wipe off and clean the board, like afterwards as a treat for himself. Father Marlin believes in God? Yes. Has a grip on reality? Debatable. I mean, how was I supposed to believe in God if Father Marlin was leading the show? In 4th grade, my parents sent me to the school counselor to try and figure out why I was having panic attacks in chapel. And she would hand me paper and pencils, and I got to draw as she asked me about my feelings. And I remember not being able to really process what was going on, but maybe my subconscious, like looking back, was telling me that God was like Santa, not real. But, it was really cool at the time because I felt safe, and I got to skip class and hang out with this lady and doodle. So at that point, then I got really into art, and I started to cope with my anxiety through art. And I convinced my parents to let me take a break for 7th and 8th grade and go to this more art-focused school, which was really great. We could chew gum in class. We could take off our shoes and just wear socks to class. It didn't have a religious affiliation. It was great. And then I went back to my old school freshman year, and most of my chapel anxiety had dissipated. And that same year, I told my mom that I didn't want to go to church on Sundays anymore. School wasn't an option, but she cried. And then a few years later, she pulled me aside, and she's like, "Now, Madeline, I know what you're going to say, but I've decided I want to go to the Unitarian Church," which is like a super chill, liberal, laid-back version of Christianity. And in that moment, I remember not feeling resentment towards her. I felt actually really validated in my feelings that okay, so I'm not the only one. Welcome to the party. Cool. And to this day, I don't really know what those panic attacks were about, but I can't help but feel that my subconscious was telling me that just because you're raised with a religion doesn't mean you have to subscribe to it. And I am now a proud agnostic. Don't believe in God, but there could be a higher power out there. I don't know. My mom has stopped going to church. My dad is still a vocal atheist, makes a lot of Jesus jokes. And last I heard, my mom saw Father Marlin at a wedding a couple of years ago, and he's now retired and can really cut a rug on the dance floor. Thanks so much.